Somewhere halfway between the Polish towns of Lublin and Chelm lies the village of Trawniki. To this unremarkable Polish village, fate assigned a tragic role. Here nearby, since July 1941, the Germans set up a concentration camp. At first, Soviet prisoners of war were sent here. Then it was the turn of civilians, including Jews. The peculiarity of the camp. However, the Trawniki concentration camp became known for something else. The Germans created hundreds of such small camps. In Trawniki, as in Ravensbrück, they trained guards and overseers for other concentration camps. In Ravensbrück, women, typically Germans, received training. In Trawniki, they trained men, predominantly from the USSR and Poland. School for overseers and camp guards began operating in September 1941. The teachers, they were officers and lower ranks of the SS who had experience working in this system. But as for the students, they got there in different ways and were representatives of different peoples. Mainly citizens of the USSR, Poles, Czechs, and Slovaks ended up here. There were also Croats and Slovenes. It is thought that the concept of substituting Germans with collaborators from conquered nations evolved among high-ranking SS officers after the invasion of the USSR, due to the dramatic increase in the number of prisoners of war and civilians being sent to concentration camps. There are several reasons cited for why the Germans opted to assign the dirty work to collaborators. One of them is explained by Himmler's inspection of concentration camp Stalag 352 near Minsk. There, the cordial host, Police General von dem Berg-Zelewski, and the commander of Einsatzgruppe B, SS Brigadeführer Arthur Niebe, who accompanied Himmler, so to say, treated their boss to a demonstrative mass execution. In the ravine near Minsk, they spent the entire day shooting Soviet prisoners of war and local Jews. When the trenches began to fill with the bodies of the killed, Himmler couldn't stand it and vomited. Berg-Zelewski sympathized with the Reichsfuhrer and complained that there were not enough personnel ready to do such work. Supposedly, not all Germans wanted to be executioners. It was then, apparently, that the idea of involving collaborators from occupied countries in this dirty and bloody business was born. The issue is not the mere occurrence of the conversation itself, but rather that it specifically led to the idea of employing collaborators as executioners. Most likely, the plans for using traitors from the conquered countries for the bloodiest and most vile deeds had been thought out in advance by the German authorities. The matter here is not a shortage of German personnel for carrying out mass murders, but rather the Nazi leadership's aim to taint as many individuals from other nations as possible with fascist atrocities. The main objective. The main task of the training school at the Trawniki concentration camp was to prepare auxiliary personnel for service in lower position in concentration camps, at transit points, and for escorting prisoners of war and civilians. Moreover, the Trawniki students could be involved in punitive actions conducted by the military police and SS Einsatzgruppen to combat partisans and pacify the local population. That is, the scope of work and the set of tasks facing the graduate of the school were planned to be quite substantial. Trainees were taught escorting, shooting, performing guard duties, recruiting capos, camp police, and informants in concentration camps, finding and selecting valuable items from inmates before their murder. A school graduate had to be psychologically stable, dedicated to the cause of National Socialism, and conscientious in carrying out the assigned tasks. Officially, the educational facility was called the SS Training Camp Trawniki. Graduates of the school were enrolled in the SS auxiliary forces. They were like freelance SS employees, so to say, half SS men. Recruitment was carried out in transit points and concentration camp by SS officers. In particular, a significant contribution to the recruitment of executioner traitors was made by the head of the camp and training center in Trawniki, SS Hauptsturmführer Karl Streibel. Prisoners of war who agreed to cooperate and be trained at the punitive schools were guided by various motives. Some went out of conviction because of their hatred for the Soviet regime or grievance against it, others in the naive hope of escape, and others, probably the majority, simply to save their own skins, deciding that it was better to live as an executioner than to suffer and die as a prisoner. The training camp for murderers was not accidentally located on the site of the concentration camp. It was very convenient. Here they could recruit potential collaborators right away and practice them on the spot. Learning process. Escape from the school of overseers was impossible. Those who found themselves there quickly realized this. For an attempt to escape followed execution. Many graduates of this school at the end and after the war, when they ended up in the hands of the Soviet KGB or the police and special services of other countries, tried to justify themselves by claiming that they were engaged in the distribution and accounting of valuables seized from detainees, or they simply escorting from one camp to another and did not participate in any atrocities. But that was a lie. The training system was built in such a way that the student, still in the process of training, had to participate in the shooting of prisoners of war, Jews and other prisoners. They brought a prisoner from the camp, and a student from the school was supposed to shoot him in the back of the head with a rifle. Next time shot was in the chest. They also trained in shooting prisoners with a pistol. Even if later on the students and graduates of this school did not participate in mass executions, they still carried the burden of having taken at least few lives from the prisoners during their training. However, most of the Travniks, as the students were called, continued their path of the villainy even after their release. That was what they were trained for. They were taught not only to kill cold-bloodedly, but also to effective torture, beat, and bring prisoners to the complete loss of human dignity. So the school students graduated as experienced sadists. Their trainees were divided into 2 battalions, commanded only by Germans: SS Untersturmführer Willy Franz and SS Obersturmführer Johann Schwarzenbacher. The company commanders in the battalion were Volksdeutsch, German living outside Germany. Platoons could be led by former students who had distinguished themselves during their training and upon graduation. Graduates were awarded 4 ranks. The lowest was the Wachtmann, a guard of junior warden. Next was the Oberwachtmann, the chief guard or supervisor. Then was Gruppenwachtmann, who was the squad leader or senior supervisor, and Sogwachtmann was the platoon commander. Prisoners of war were used in most concentration camps located both in Germany and in all the occupied countries. They were used for their intended purposes. They guarded, killed, tortured, caught fugitives, and performed all the other dirty and vile work of the executioners. A total of 5,082 guard officers were released from the training camp. The national composition was quite diverse. Atrocities. Guards of the Trawniki school participated in many atrocities. For example, in Operation Reinhardt, developed for the mass extermination of Jews. They were used during the suppression of the Warsaw Uprising from August 1st to October 2nd, 1944, and the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising from April 19th to May 16th, 1943. There were 5,082 guards, overseers, and executioners. If each of them killed 100 people, then the figure already amounts to 500,000 victims. And many Travniks in their practice have killed even more. Such a team of professional killers was prepared for their terrible purposes by SS trainers. The Wachtmanns became SS executioners for the people of the occupied countries. It was from Trawniki that the famous executioner Ivan Demyanyuk came out, who in addition to the Trawniki concentration camp was noted in Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and everywhere leaving a bloody trail. On the conscience of these sadists are not 1,000 tortured, shot, gassed, and killed people. The executioner managed to immigrate. He lived mostly a quite peaceful life. It was only in the 70s that charges were brought against him, as several surviving prisoners identified him. The case dragged on for decades. Ultimately, he was extradited from the United States to Israel. However, the executioner died residing in a nursing home at the age of 92, never having awaited the final court decision. Demyanyuk was not the only one who managed to escape punishment for his monstrous crimes. Unfortunately, if the fascist executioners were not caught immediately after the war, they had a chance to avoid capital punishment.